Got it. So the idea here is to try to mix machine and zombie through outlets and typical outlet support for me and ancient gears. So I got 3 V-Gen to keep Exceed because, you know, he's indestructible as far as battle, can't be destroyed by battle, and I can place a cubic counter on any monster that fights him, permanently turning that monster into a token that cannot attack. A token that has no effect of another token that also can't attack. It's pretty nice. I have one ancient gear statue because with it, um, I can special summon this, so it doesn't count as my normal summon. And with it, I can tribute it to special summon from my hand or deck any one ancient gear golem or monster that mentions ancient gear golem with ignoring its summoning conditions, which means it's easy access to my other ancient gear monsters that I have. I have two Uni Zombie because it's a tuner and it can quickly help me get through my zombie deck by sending key monsters I need from my deck to the grave and from my hand to the grave. I have one Ancient Gear Hunting Hound because with it I can fusion summon from my hand or field for Ancient Gear monsters. I have one Castle of Dark Illusions because I want to use this card and I want this to be the main thing with the deck. Shuten Doji. I have 2 copies of him for banish support for like helping me get out of a banish heavy deck situation. Mizuki for Monster Reborn for my zombies. Ancient Gear Wyvern I have one of, so I can again access my other Ancient Gear cards, which is pretty good. Gozuki for sending zombies from my deck to the grave, and being able to special summon a zombie from my hand if it gets sent to the graveyard. Um, one Necroworld Banshee for accessing and protecting Zombie World. One Devouring Sarcophagus to help protect my zombie monsters in battle and to take over other monsters. One Ancient Gear Tanker. I have this because it allows me to special summon an Ancient Gear monster from my hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. And if my opponent controls a monster, then I can special summon that Ancient Gear monster from the graveyard instead, which is pretty good. I have one Vampire Frontline because of the attack and defense modulation ability for up to 3,000 attack and defense extra per battle by using life points in increments of 100, and she can also revive any monsters that she destroys by battle at the end of the battle phase, which is also really nice. Chain Chi, I have 1 copy of because again I can send zombies from the deck to the grave. And with her, if she gets banished, I can banish another zombie from the grave to special summon her. The zombie of choice to normally special summon is actually Algol Mizera, because when I banish him from the graveyard, then I can special summon him. So banishing Chain Chi nets me 2 bodies in the field if Algol is also in the graveyard. So I also have Jacko Ballin, who is the upgraded version of the Pumpkin, the king of all ghosts, if you didn't know. And you can see Pumpkin right there in the middle, the little pumpkin. And you see the skull coming out the top. That's literally Pumpkin in his true form. Very underrated, powerful zombie, in my opinion, because with Zombie World on the field, he doesn't have to be on the field for him to do this, but he can so first off, he can special summon himself by discarding one other zombie monster from your hand, which is nice. Means he's a free summon because you kind of want zombie monsters to be in the graveyard anyways, usually. So that's nice. So during your opponent's main phase at quick effect speed, You can target one zombie monster in either graveyard and special summon that zombie, and then banish this card face up into the end phase. But when that other zombie you summoned gets destroyed, banish it when it leaves the field. Just when it leaves the field in general, banish it, not just, if it gets destroyed. And so, there's that. You can only use each effect of Jackal Bowling once per turn. He's very great at disrupting my opponent's plays, because if my opponent, let's say, sends a monster to the graveyard that they then need to revive to the field to continue their play, I can revive that monster to my field during their main phase, and just completely throw their play all the way off. The Despair Uranus is a very powerful card that I don't see many people talk about because of how difficult it is to get in the field, because it's just a level 8 monster, and it's also rock, but it has 2900 attack, 2300 defense, level 8, it's a rock type, and it says when this card is tribute summoned while you control no spell or trap cards, you can activate this effect. Your opponent declares either continuous spell or continuous trap, and you set one card of that type directly from your deck. This card gains 300 attack for each face-up spell or trap you control. Face-up cards in your spell and trap card zone cannot be destroyed by card effects. That's the reason I use this card, because of that one clause. That spells and traps that are face up in my spell and trap zone cannot be destroyed by card effects. That's just glorious. That means my opponent could go to use any of those types of cards to destroy these bad boys right here, and it's just not gonna work. And that's the idea. Where was I? So, Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound I have in this deck because he can deal piercing battle damage um, up to twice per turn when this attacking card destroys a monster at battle. I can discard one machine monster. This card can attack again in a row, meaning that it can attack up to 3 times per turn if I discard an extra machine monster per attack. If this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add one polymerization from your deck to your hand, and if you do, add one other Ezekiel monster from your graveyard to your hand. That being said, I'm going to add one polymerization to my deck now. Um, hmm, I'll get rid of one Uni Zombie, that's fine. There it is. Polymerization. Okay, so where were we? Doom King Baladrach. So during the standby phase, this guy can special summon himself every standby phase if there's a field spell. The field spell of choice for him is Zombie World, because then his second effect take place where he can negate one zombie effect per turn, and then he can banish one monster on the field or in either graveyard in response to a zombie monster activating its effect. So, very nice little recurring nightmare there. I have 2 copies of Algo Misera because obviously protection is a great way to go, and the best kind of protection is the one that's hidden away. And Algo Misera can hide away in your hand or can be forgotten about in the graveyard as an excellent form of complete board protection for all your zombies. And with Zombie World, that just means all of your monsters. So Algo Misera is a must-have, and I usually run him at 2 copies because that usually ensures that he's pretty split up through the deck at two copies, and usually not just hoping I run into him, you know. And even at one copy, I have so many cards that can send zombies to the grave that I can set this up usually in like turn within the first like one or two turns. I can set it up. Ancient Gear Dark Golem I have in here because again 3000 attack and defense, and its name becomes Ancient Gear Golem on the field or in the graveyard, which is pretty cool. That does mean that you cannot run three Ancient Gear Golems and any Ancient Gear Dark Golems. So if you run Ancient Gear Dark Golem at 3, you can't run any Ancient Gear Golems because on the field and in the graveyard, this card counts as Ancient Gear Golem. I think that's the clause. Maybe because it. I'll have to figure that out. I think that because it doesn't say that it counts as Ancient Gear Golem in the deck, then you can still have 3 and 3, but you can only activate up to 3 of a combined, like between the two sets of cards, you can only have up to 3 on the field or in the graveyard at a time. But because of the graveyard tidbit, the rules would make it so that one would not be able to be sent to the graveyard. It would have to be banished, which would break the rules because it wouldn't be banishing. So to avoid breaking the rules, it probably would just keep it to 3 of either or a combination of the two cards in the deck. Probably. I don't want to test it out right now, but I will later. So I have 3 copies of Eldritch the Golden Lord, because it's level 10, easy access to my rank 10s, and he can snipe other cards off the field, spell, trap, or monster. It is targeted removal, but it's removal that's from the hand, and he can revive himself once per turn, and give himself or any zombie special summon from the hand by his effect an extra 1000 attack and defense for one turn, and for that same one turn, they are unable to be destroyed by card effects, which is also very nice. I have one polymerization for the Ancient Gear Monster effect that allows me to add polymerization to my hand. I have one Ancient Gear Drill because uh, it's just allows you to add one spell card from your deck to your hand if you control an Ancient Gear Monster, but you cannot activate that spell card this turn, which is fine and dandy. Ancient Gear Catapult. While you control no monsters, target one face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon one Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. That's the reason I got this in this deck, so that if I happen to have nothing on the field, I can just use this, destroy one face-up something that I own, and then get a play started. I can banish this card from my graveyard and target one face-up I control, destroy it, and if I do, special summon one Ancient Gear token, which can also help me get something started. The token does have 0 attack and defense and is level 1 machine earth type. I can only use one effect of this card once per turn, and only once that turn. I have one copy of Ancient Gear Fusion. It's a fusion spell for the Ancient Gear cards, go figure. Fusion, summon one Ancient Gear Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. If you use Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound, you can use as you control this fusion material. You can also use monsters from your deck as material. So I just so happen to have Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound and a card that counts as Ancient Gear Golem on the field. So there's that. I have 2 copies of White Veil. But no, 2 copies of White Veil. Basically, with this card, Uh, basically, if it's equipped to a monster and that monster attacks, my opponent cannot activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step, giving the monster an Ancient Gear-like quality. So this is an excellent card to add to your Ancient Gear decks for your non-Ancient Gear machine monsters to give them that classic Ancient Gear monster feel, to make them feel like they're part of the Ancient Gear archetype. Maybe like imagine it's like an Ancient Gear techno virus that turns those machines into like ancient gears and stuff with this ability. And then that 3000 damage that they take could also be like a like callback to like the ancient gear golem, because it has 3000 attack and defense, so you fuck it up, you take 3000 damage type stuff. I don't know, it's just a thought. But if an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, negate the effects that face that spell and trap cards. If this monster destroys your opponent's monster by battle, it also destroys all spell and trap cards they control. But when this card leaves the field, then the player that controls this card takes 3000 damage. So there is also that. I'm running one copy of Gear Town. When it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, I can special summon one Ancient Gear monster from my hand, deck, or graveyard. So it's like an Omni summon for Ancient Gears. But it does rely on summoning conditions. It doesn't ignore those, unfortunately. I'm running two copies of Zombie World because, so some of the reasons that Zombie World is so powerful, despite only having, what, 2 lines of text, and it's only, like, what, 2 sentences. Um, so all monsters on the field and in the graveyards become zombie monsters. Neither player contributes summon monsters except zombie monsters. Okay, let's start with the first line. So all monsters on the field and in the graveyards become zombie monsters. That doesn't seem that strong until you realize how many cards say target one beast monster you control. If a spellcaster you control does this, if you have a dragon type monster that gets hit by this, but then you have Zombie World that turns all those to zombies, all of a sudden those effects don't apply because your monsters are zombies now. They're no longer dragons or, fish or whatever. They're now zombies. So that doesn't work. If you have a card that says revive one spellcaster, guess what? You're not reviving a spellcaster because it's a zombie now. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh yeah, let's just make sure that the special summon this ultra mega powerful monster. All you need are 3 dark dragon type monsters. Guess what you're not summoning? That monster that requires those 3 dark dragon types. Because you have 3 dark zombie types now. Despite them having the name dragon. Pokemon. If you know, you know. Charizard. Just fucking Charizard. Anyways, um, so Zombie World also stops the effects of cards that are um, focused on tribute summoning. So that means that Zombie World completely shuts down Kaiju decks. Zombie World fully shuts down Monarch decks, depending on how the Monarch deck is played. And with Zombie World having protection, like Necro World Banshee, which protects Zombie World from being targeted or destroyed by card effects, and then Necro World Banshee having protection like Doom King Baladratch and Algul Mazera, it just makes it more difficult at that point. So I do have Fire Prison, and it does a lot, but the main reason I have it is because all monsters in the field cannot attack except for link monsters. And then with this card, if there's a link monster on the field, then no one can link summon a monster with a lower link level. link rating than that monster. So if I summon a Link 3 monster, or a Link 5 monster, oh god, and then I play Fire Prison, then my opponent and myself will not be able to link summon any other monsters except for Link 5 or higher monsters. And that's kind of crazy. It also negates the activated effects of all Cyberus monsters, and Cyberus monsters cannot attack and cannot be targeted for attacks and cannot be targeted by card effects. So, Fire Prison does a lot for a normal field spell. And I feel like it should have a higher rating than normal, but it's also a card that I feel like is under the radar right now. I have one copy of Recycle because, again, being able to add my spells and traps back to my deck is just essential. I pay 300 life points during my standby phase if I would like to, and then I can select one non-monster card in my graveyard and return it to the bottom of my deck. I have one copy of Ancient Gear Castle. All Ancient Gear monsters gain 300 attack each time a monster is normal summoned or special summoned. Now, each time a monster is normal summoned, Jesus fucking Christ, set, place one counter on this card. I still did not read that sentence right. Hold on. Bear with me. I'm a I'm a little tired right now. Each time a monster is normal summoned or set, place one counter on this card. If you tribute summon an ancient gear monster, if you tribute summon, someone was talking to me, sorry. If you tribute summon an ancient gear monster face up, you can tribute this card instead, if the number of its counters is equal to or greater than the number of required tributes. I have one copy of Ancient Gear Fortress because it protects my normal or special summoned Ancient Gear monsters the turn that they were normal summoned from being destroyed by my opponent's card effects, which is really nice. My opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of Ancient Gear cards and effects, which is absolutely busted as an ability, because then I can just play my turn freely knowing that my opponent can't do anything in response to anything that I do. And then if this card is destroyed in the spell and trap zone, I can special summon my Ancient Gear monster from my hand or graveyard. Also, I cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Ancient Gear monsters. Now, I do have 3 copies of Cauldron of the Old Man. I get to get 1 token on it every standby phase, every one of my standby phases. And for every token, I can gain 500 life points or inflict 300 damage to my opponent. And I have 3 of them because it's not once per turn. And so that means that I can do it if I have all 3 of these face up on the field for 10 turns. That means that I can do 5, 10, 15,000 healing in 1 turn, or I can do 3, 6, 9,000 damage in 1 turn. You know? 7 Cities of the Golden Land I have 1 copy of, and my fusion spell for Eldritch the Mad Golden Lad. Now, it does also work as a prevention spell because it can temporarily lock down face down spell and trap cards from being able to be flipped face up in the first place whenever a zombie is special summoned. And with Zombie World, that means that every monster, including my opponent's monsters, will be zombies when they hit the field, counting it as a special summoned zombie monster. I do have 2 copies of Cubic Ascension. They are battle traps that just special summon V-Jam the Cubic Seed whenever they are activated. And it's activated when an opponent declares an attack. And if I have 2,000 or less life points than my opponent, when I activate this card, I also get the ability to special summon up to two more copies of VGM the Cubic Seed from my hand, deck, or graveyard. And one other important thing about this is that with the first VGM I summon, my opponent is forced to attack into it, and that's great because VJam can place that cubic counter on my opponent's monsters, causing it to essentially become a vegetable of a monster, you know. Um, Now, what's also great about this card is that it can be activated a second time from the graveyard by banishing it when my opponent declares an attack. And when I do, um, okay, wait, I had that backwards. Hold on. So, when an opponent, this is why it's important to read card effects. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon one VGem the cubic seed from your deck, and if you do, change the attack to it and perform battle damage calculation. That's fine. Where I messed up was that I thought that upon initially activating it, you could perform the 2,000 life point feat, but no. The 2,000 life points or less than your opponent's ability is if it's in the graveyard, then you can banish it at that point. If that condition is met, then you can banish this card from your graveyard and special summon up to three different copies of VGen the Cubic Seed from your hand deck or graveyard. Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine is a trap that allows me to special summon Eldritch or any other zombie from my deck or graveyard. And if I don't have Eldritch, it only lets me special summon Eldritch. And it also allows me to grab other Eldritch spells and traps from my deck and set them to the field upon being banished from the graveyard. I have two copies of Solemn Judgment because who doesn't want to cut their life points in half to stop your opponent from doing any one of something where you just say no? I have Spell Vanishing because who doesn't want to discard two cards from their hand to tell their opponent no when they activate a spell card, and then look through your opponent's hand and deck and get rid of all other copies of that spell card as well, while also getting information on your opponent's strategy and the deck that they're using. And then I have two copies of Curse Seal the Forbidden Spell, because who doesn't want to sacrifice one of their own powerful spell cards, or a weak one if you have one of those in your hand at the time, to actually stop your opponent from activating their own spell card, or to stop yourself from activating your own spell card, just to permanently stop your opponent from activating that spell card's named uh, card for the rest of the duel. Then I have two copies of Dark Bribe, because who doesn't want to let their opponent draw an extra card so that their opponent can then not activate any one copy of that spell or trap that they were trying to activate just then? Yeah, nobody likes doing that, so I have two copies of this. I have two copies of Spirit Barrier because, of course, I love to fight with my monsters and not take any battle damage, which is what this does if I have a monster. Then I have three copies of Unending Nightmare because you can't have a deck that's based on, zombies and darkness and illusions without talking about nightmares that don't end, you know. With this card, once per chain, not once per chain, once per goddamn chain, I can pay 1,000 life points and destroy one face-up spell or trap card in the field. Why this is so terrifying is because if I'm dueling you and you say yes, let me activate this field spell, I say no and I activate Unending Nightmare. Your field spell's gone. You're like, that's alright, I have another copy. You activate it again. I say, haha, no, again. And it pops it again. So now I have 6,000 life points, and you're out 2 field spells. You know you have one more in your hand, and you know you have another card in your hand that's going to get a field spell out of the graveyard and activate it. So you say, you know what? He's not going to do that. So you activate your third copy of your field spell, because you need this field spell to run your deck. And I say, nope, fuck you, and I pop it a third time. I'm down to 5k. And you're like, whoa. So you activate your card to bring that field spell back. And as soon as that field spell touches the mat, it has the very molecules that make up the back side of that fucking card have barely come into contact with the other molecules that make up the top side of the mat. And I'm just like, nah, fam, get it out of here. And I'm down to 4k, and you're just like, what the hell, bro? So then that's when you're just like, I'm going to just end my turn. And then it flips to my turn, and I lay down one of these bad boys. And you're just like, bro, why? And I'm like, why not? And so immediately on turn 2, I'm already gaining more than, my fair share of this stuff back. And then I have like 2 or 3 of these. So I'm like, oh man, that's horrible. Like absolutely, really, really fucking bad. Like, yeah. Now, I kind of want at least one aroma jar in this deck, actually. Just as like an extra way to get some life points. Hmm. What would I even change it out with, though? I have one, well, technically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5. So I technically have 5 monsters I could really brick with in this deck. Because he can be special summoned by discarding another zombie monster. She can be special summoned when an attack is declared. He can be special summoned from the banished area by banishing himself to protect any zombie monsters from being destroyed. And then these guys can special summon themselves from the graveyard by discarding a spell or trap from my hand to then snipe away a singular card in the field in a targeted fashion. So really it's just those 5, so I think that's not too bad. We're gonna take out one white veil to get an aroma jar. Aroma jar. There we go, I think we're done.